My experience, though, has indicated that most of the rank and file people in government and in the American military have simply not been clued into what is really going on. I feel that the definite knowledge that the United States government holds is in the hands of a very select few people. And I think in order to keep that information out of other hands, they resort to classification, denial, and disinformation.
I hadn't been prepared for any of this. I had moved from skepticism about UFOs at the outset to the possibility that something in some shape, way, or form existed. I felt the need to get back with my feet on the ground and talk to people that, wearing my technology hat, I at least knew and understood. And so I returned to Washington to tackle General George Mullner of the U.S. Air Force, the man responsible for how the Air Force spends its budget, including, I knew, a significant proportion of its black budget on advanced aircraft and weaponry. I sort of knew what he was going to say. I just wanted to hear him say it.
General, I've just spent a couple of days in southern Colorado where a lot of apparently credible witnesses are reporting sightings of extraordinarily unconventional aircraft. And I mean things like huge black triangles, silent helicopters, all kinds of very extraordinary craft. Should we be looking to the US Air Force for whatever is going on in this place?
Well, the only programs that I'm aware of that we have operating out in that environment, obviously our 117s operate out of Holloman. They're triangular shaped, obviously they're black, and they operate at night quite frequently and so on. But I think the 117 has become somewhat of a familiar planform to a lot of people, although it is difficult to recognize just because of its shape. It is triangular in many planes, as you know. And then all the rest of the airplanes that we have operating down in the Holloman area in particular are all conventional airplanes. So I don't know of any other development programs or anything else that's going on and down in that area or in southern Colorado in general, or for that matter in the New Mexico area. We don't have anything of significance operating there. I can tell you as an aviator, though, quite frequently it is very, very difficult to discern what a platform is. B-2, for instance, if you're looking near co-altitude with it, it just seems to disappear into the background.
But again, these people are describing things that hover literally right over them sometimes. Seemingly unmistakable sightings of these things.
Well, I'll tell you, if they can get me the name of the contractor and whoever's operating, I'd love to put them under contract to develop some of these things. But they're not anything that we're flying down there right now that I'm aware of.
I went back to the desert to pursue the story. I'd known that the Air Force would be economical with the truth, but somehow I felt that General Mullner had been telling me as much as he could, even on the subject of new stealth developments. Equally remarkable was the fact he talked about black programs at all.
I think the next generation of stealth, beyond where we're at right now, at least initially, would probably be developed in the black. The techniques necessary to achieve those next gains, I think, are going to require some sensitivity. And there may be some weapons technologies that would be developed in a covert fashion until they're mature enough to bring forward. Those are the only two that really come to mind that would require a black development.
Given that it appears that few people really do seem to know, both in the military and in government, what is going on in the black world, I'm beginning to wonder who's accountable here. The interesting thing about the atomic bomb program was how few people in government knew about it. The only politicians who were let in on it were literally the President of the United States of the day. Towards the latter stages of the bomb program, other people were introduced to it. I think there is probably deep symmetry there with what is going on today, in that what we seem to be seeing on this journey is a whole raft of individuals in quite senior positions in the military and in government who do not know, or do not appear to know, what is going on.
For those of you interested in Los Angeles right now,
As I headed west, I was reminded of a conversation I'd had with Bob Widmer. He told me of the unbearable security restrictions he'd been subjected to in order to maintain project secrecy. I suspected not a whole lot had changed.
At the time, the CIA was in their glory. I don't want to go into details of the kind of life I had to lead, and the way and the things I had to do and conduct myself with my family and so forth. I just want to tell you.
Was it very restrictive?
It was unbelievable. It was not only restrictive, but it was counter to my conscience and morals and so forth.
The whole thing of black program secrecy?
Yes. And I think it's bad. I think a person can do it for a small window in his career. I don't think he has to. But it's not what I would call, and it's part of our problem today, it's not what I would call a good formula over a long haul.
Counter-creative?
Not only counter-creative, counter against human, what I call human understanding of one another. I mean, the degree they went through in order to hold the secrecy was unbelievable.
Did it frighten you, ever?
Yes.
I think the main reason we still have a lot of these black programs is because it's fun. People working on the program like to think that they're important, like to play I've Got a Secret. It makes it a lot easier to run a program if you don't have to worry about members of Congress asking questions at hearings or reporters running around reporting on the problems your program's having.
I was now heading for a rare interview with Jack Gordon, head of the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, named after the foul-smelling chemicals they used to build their planes with. It was this facility, located on the edge of the high desert in California, that developed most of the Air Force's black aircraft, from the U-2 spy plane in the 1950s to the Blackbird in the 1960s and Stealth in the 1970s. Even though it has little to show for what it does today, the high level of employment at the plant suggests that the Skunk Works is still as busy as ever, doing what it does best.
Part of our mission statement in the Skunk Works speaks to urgently needed requirements. For instance, we were the inventors of the U-2 at a time when the world was quite concerned about what the Soviet Union was doing with their advanced bombers and strategic missiles.
You once told me that there are 3 shades of Skunk Works programs: white, gray, and black. Give me an example from each category, if you will.
A white program, of course, is the standard program that everybody is familiar with, and an example of that today might be our single stage to orbit work, our X-33 prototype program that we're doing with NASA. And that is a program that is being managed on the internet. We're connected with a number of NASA centers and with government organizations and with our team partners. A gray program is one that has elements of secrecy associated with it, but is an acknowledged program. The F-117 would be in that category today, in that everybody is aware of the F-117 stealth fighter, but of course the actual signature characteristics and the operational characteristics of the airplane are close hold. So that would be an example of a special access gray program. And then a black program, of course, is an unacknowledged program that we just do not acknowledge that it exists at all, and that is that sensitive and is at the edge of our national defense.
Here's a catch-22 question. Do you have any unacknowledged programs at the moment?
What are unacknowledged programs?
Well, I'm asking you. Do you?
The answer is we just don't comment on unacknowledged programs, whether they exist or not. By definition, since they're unacknowledged, they're unacknowledged.
There's a kind of post-X-Files perception that the Skunk Works is responsible for just about anything. Are you responsible for UFOs?
Well, the Skunk Works has had a long association, I suppose, in the press with UFOs, with programs like Aurora, which I believe was really a code word for some B-2 funding. I know in the popular magazines there has been some speculation that there is an underground tunnel between our Hellendale facility and Edwards Air Force Base where we transport the aliens back and forth. But I can assure you that I haven't seen any of these little green folks yet.
For all my contacts in the defense business, it was clear that the formal approach was going nowhere. The building blocks of a story were there. A government that had upwards of $30 billion a year to spend on classified programs, and ordinary people who were reporting things in the sky that they couldn't begin to explain. It was bridging the gap that was the challenging part. I decided to follow up something that Jim Mars had told me about a covert government scheme to invest in a form of psychic spying called remote viewing. The program itself was weird enough, but there was an even stranger twist in the tale.
The thing that finally pushed me off the fence as far as believing that there really was something going on and something probably outside of our normal experience was back in the early 90s when I discovered the U.S. Army's remote viewing program. Now, remote viewing is their term for being able to perceive persons and places and things at a distance by means other than the five senses, which is kind of a fancy way of what we used to call clairvoyance. It is a psychic ability, and you talk about skepticism. I was highly skeptical of that until I interviewed the people that were actually doing it within the Army and the people who had done it within the CIA and the scientists that had worked on it. It was one of the most scientifically studied experiments in history. I talked to people that were on the oversight committees of this whole thing and found out the government obviously felt like they were getting something from it because they'd kept funding it through 4 administrations, okay? And the bottom line was every single military-trained remote viewer had had a direct experience with the UFOs. And they all said that they represent craft from other worlds with people in them. So once I was satisfied that the remote viewing experience was legitimate, then I had to take seriously what they're saying.
Jim Mars gave me the phone number of Lynn Buchanan, an ex-Defense Intelligence Agency remote viewer whose credentials checked out. I felt uneasy because I was getting into the world of spying, where disinformation is part of the toolkit. But at this stage, I was prepared to try anything that might take the investigation forward, especially since Jim Mars' story seemed to imply that the American intelligence services might actually have been using their remote viewers to gather information on UFOs. Buchanan asked me to meet him outside a church in the dusty New Mexican town of Socorro.
An experienced controlled remote viewer who's been at this for several years can carry this entire thing to where he can read a document locked in a safe halfway around the world, where he can draw the floor plans of a building where a hostage is being kept, and it's all done through the body. It's all a physical thing to do. There are no trances, no altered states of any kind. We had a senator come one time and see if he wanted to fund what we were doing, and he watched a demonstration session that we had. Afterwards, he said that he was totally underwhelmed, that all he saw was two guys sitting at a table smoking and joking, and now and then somebody'd write something down. Our director handed him the summary of our session and said, "Yeah, but look what they wrote down." He had brought in a target to task us with that only he knew the answer to. He looked at the target, he looked at our information we had provided. Damn, you know, and we got funded. It is not a mystical science. It's something that can be taught to anyone. It's more of a martial art than anything else.
So far, so good. But things were about to take an unexpected turn. As we chatted, it rapidly became clear that Buchanan's take on the UFO issue was a lot more personal than I'd ever imagined. Not only had he had a UFO experience as Mars had predicted, he also claimed to have been abducted.
This little gray guy started talking to me, and he was actually very nice. After we talked, he invited me up to the front where evidently the control area was, and he answered questions for me. He showed me everything that I asked about. He showed me how he worked this control panel. We were taking off and landing, and they'd bring more people in. We'd take off and land, and they'd bring somebody else in. And while we were landed, he actually let me play like I was working the control panel. And then one time before we went into a very long jump, he actually did the takeoff, let me work the control panel, and then took over when we landed again.
Where were you taking off and landing from and to?
I have no idea. It was the middle of the night, and so I have no idea where we were. I have no idea how far the short hops were. I have no idea.
As if all this wasn't surreal enough, Buchanan then told me that the captain of the alien ship had told him that he would immediately forget everything that had happened to him. And indeed that, he said, was just what had happened.
20 some odd years after that, I had this obsession. I couldn't leave the house without going back, knowing I had forgotten something. I would go back and check the doors, check the locks, I would check everything. Finally, about 25 years after the event, I had gone back, my wife and I were going somewhere one Sunday, and I had gone back repeatedly to the house to see what I'd forgotten, and she started making fun of me. And she said, well, you've checked upstairs, you've checked downstairs, did you check the backyard? That's the only thing you haven't checked yet. When she said that, it just all flooded back. And I knew what I'd forgotten for 25 years.
The interview with Lynn Buchanan was probably one of the most bizarre experiences of my life. I found what he had to say about remote viewing very interesting, because this is something that I can correlate and verify. We do know that the CIA and the Defense Intelligence Agency ran a controlled remote viewing program from the mid-70s onwards. And we know that it was funded to the tune of $12 million or thereabouts. But when it gets into the realm of abductions and extraterrestrials he claimed to have experienced, then that is deeply weird territory for me, and it's not an area that I naturally feel comfortable with at all. But you know, the guy said it happened to him, and who am I to disbelieve him? You know, I think it's one of those things you either have to accept or you don't, and I'm not going to be judgmental on it.
The key issue for me was whether the Defense Intelligence Agency had taken the story seriously and perhaps kept a log of UFO experiences like Buchanan's.
Jim, hi, it's Nick Cook here.
It wouldn't be conclusive, but if Jim Mars had heard the story from other DIA sources, it would at least give it an outlandish sort of status.
Did you hear about his, let's say, abduction experience from other sources, or did you originally hear it from him? You heard it from other sources. Right, interesting. Well, it ties in completely with what you said. But I mean,
If nothing else, this journey into the world of psychic espionage, like my earlier detour to NASA, had shown that significant government money was being spent on ideas right on that frontier of what is real and what is imagined. It was time to get back to hardcore defense. This is where the US Air Force develops and tests exotic-sounding weapons like lasers and plasma cannons. Technology on the very edge of achievable science. These lasers are being used to measure distances across the galaxy, but the US Air Force is also developing the technology into a powerful new weapon.
Throughout time, there have been advances that have changed dramatically the way wars are fought. We believe this is one of those advances because for the first time, it will allow us to strike an attacking missile from hundreds of miles away at the speed of light. So to strike at the speed of light, it signals a new era of defense. What you're looking at here is a model of the United States Air Force's airborne laser, a project to package a weapons-class laser on a Boeing 747-400 series freighter aircraft, a commercial aircraft, placing that laser in that aircraft, and then developing all the technologies needed so that that laser light will emanate from the nose of the aircraft to strike a theater ballistic missile hundreds of miles away. The type of missile, theater ballistic missile, typical would be the Scud missiles that were used against us in the Gulf War.
Cleared to fire.
As I listened to Rich Garcia, the thought I couldn't get out of my head was this. If an Air Force information officer is showing me this stuff, what on earth are they doing behind closed doors? Striking at the speed of light is all very well, but trying to book a hotel room in Las Vegas on a US public telephone is a challenge all of its own. I was now on the very last leg of my journey. The point where the white world of open defense meets the black world of super secrecy. I never thought I'd look on Vegas as anything like a regular place, but considering where I've been and where I'm going, it almost feels normal.
Going up.
It's Nick Cook here, how are you? The place I'm heading for is Area 51.
Not too bad at all.
Nowhere in America is more secret or has attracted more suspicion about what the government is up to. What I needed was a guide who could show me the ropes.
All being well, we'll be chatting with a chap called Mark Farmer, who he's more of a journalist than a kind of obsessive, but he's also tracked a lot of secret aircraft and defense programs, and I'm entering a world here that I haven't come across hitherto, which is people who are prepared to give up an awful lot of time to track programs and aircraft. I guess really they're enthusiasts, but in a very, very dedicated way, in a way that most of us don't have the time or the energy or the inclination to do.
Area 51 is 100 miles north of Vegas. In recent years, it has become a meeting point for people looking for top-secret black aircraft and those who believe in ET. Quite where these two fitted in, I hadn't a clue.
I've only seen something unusual just once, and that was in 96? It
was in 96.
And don't know what it was, but it wasn't an airplane. But that's about all I know.
It looked like a firefly above the ridge. It was bouncing on the ridge.
A blue light firefly just bouncing around in the air, and then it went away. So we know what it wasn't, but don't know what it was.
So what do you think is going on in there?
Testing. Aircraft and other aerial vehicles.
Definitely testing.
High technology. They've been there for years testing. This is a perfect place for it.
A lot of people say there's nothing there, but the way I see it, why would they have such security there?
If there's nothing there.
Yeah, they watch you like a hawk when you go out there.
We were just out there, and they were watching us like a hawk.
We got the jump on.
But this is if you're going to test, that really weird stuff, that high technology stuff, what better place in the middle of nowhere?
I guess you get all sorts out here. On the road out of Vegas is Rachel, a tiny settlement in the shadow of Area 51 that's largely populated by, and in some cases making a living from, people who are convinced that aliens are amongst us. How many people do you think you've had come through here?
Oh, God. A million, maybe?
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Lots of folks. It's
well, you
amazing.
guys have been around just today, and you've seen where it got busy. You've seen where it got slow. And you've seen all the in-between things. But it happens like that. And by just going through our guest books, I probably have this many signatures at least put together. Just pages and pages. Not, you know.
Both sides.
Have you had any strange experiences that have happened to you here?
Well, we had one that to us kind of set things in motion. We had a beam of light about this big around, a big flashlight, come through the door. That was the size, about a big flashlight.
It's that door right there.
It shot about 6 feet into the room. It totally illuminated the door jamb. And it was at least 20 below zero outside, so I'm telling you, the door was closed. This
It was very
object
cold.
came through.
We were the only ones here.
Right.
At that time.
It happened between 8:30 and 9:30 at night, and we both felt that there was a presence. Well, we looked at each other. We were listening to television, talking, and said...
I said, did you see what I think I just saw? She said, yes, I did.
Yeah.
And I said, make yourself at home. You're welcome to be here. And then she said,
oh, we got to laughing because it was close to Christmas, the holidays, and you put milk and cookies out for Santa Claus. So I said,
Yes.
well, maybe. Oh, I said, no, if you can come through a steel-clad door, you can damn well open a beer can or get in one of my refrigerators. So
Make
just
yourself
go
at home.
ahead and help yourself, you know.
Soon after Rachel, I turned onto an unmarked road. Just ahead was Area 51. It doesn't look like much, but Area 51, also known as Groom Lake, is so secret it doesn't appear on any maps, even though it's surrounded by a closed-off piece of government land the size of Switzerland. For a place that doesn't officially exist, its security is incredibly tight, though you have to look hard to know it's there. I had been forewarned that every mile of my approach would be monitored by security cameras and sensor devices. What have we been able to glean about what goes on inside Area 51? The answer is not much. There's an airbase inside, and its 6-mile runway is the longest on Earth. The people who work here are brought in on private buses or flown in on unmarked charter planes. This is the crossover from the white world to the black, the place where the road runs out, and where I met my contact, Mark Farmer. So Mark, I feel like I'm on the edge of the world, but tell me, where are we?
In some ways you are on the edge of the world, the edge of the white world. As you go over there a couple hundred yards is the border to the restricted area which surrounds the Groom Lake covert testing facility. And once you go just beyond the road there, past those signs that we were just at, you're liable to arrest, search and seizure. People that are taken and arrested there are forced to sign a statement that makes sure that they were exposed to any inadvertent exposure to classified material. And you know, they do business differently just a couple hundred yards from here. That out here we enjoy all the rights and privileges as the citizens of the United States and the United States Constitution. But you pass that line and all that ends.
For skeptics, these pictures provide proof of Area 51's existence. They were taken from a peak overlooking the base, which has since been commandeered by the government and closed to the public. For me, pictures are simply icing on the cake. I've never seen the base inside Area 51, but like the black world itself, I don't need to know it's there.
Area 51 out in the Nevada desert has long been America's most highly classified aerospace research and development center. During the Cold War, that was where we developed spy planes like the U-2 and the SR-71, and that's where we tested stealth aircraft. I think it's clearly the case that there continue to be a number of advanced technology aircraft being tested at Area 51.
This is the heartland of the billion-dollar secret. And now that I'm here, the question that's nagging me is, how much secrecy do you actually need in a post-Cold War world?
Hey, it's been going on for almost 50 years. There's been an incredible investment in these facilities. It's a way of doing business, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And you also have to look at it as the people who are in charge out there, these civil servants who are non-elected, folks who are running these programs, still view this through the prism of that conflict. That it's still an us versus them to most of these people. And also, some of these programs maybe didn't work out very well. A lot of money is spent on these. Maybe you built a $15 billion turkey. Who wants to be responsible for that? So a lot of it is a, cover your own behind sort of mentality.
I think it is important for us to be able to send our warriors to the battlefield with the best possible equipment to give them the greatest possible advantage. We are not into attrition warfare, and as a result of that, we need to maintain a technological superiority on that battlefield. I think it is a very small price to pay for the general public not to have total access to these things until the right time comes along in order to maintain that technological superiority.
That's not something Glenn Campbell agrees with. He'd been an activist against black world secrecy for years.
As long as you have a black world, you have a country within a country, a sort of totalitarian regime that does not conform to the rules of outside democracy. It is kind of an anachronism. It doesn't really belong here in America, yet here it is. As long as you have a need for defense, that's what you're going to have. You're going to have a military that isn't accountable. You're going to have a world that isn't accountable to our normal rules. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that there should be no secrets in the military. It's just an interesting place to study how humanity works. I equate Area 51. Area 51 awakens in me an old memory I have of going to Berlin during the Cold War and peering over the wall into East Berlin. There's the same feeling of being on the border of something. I've always been interested in borders, places where two opposite cultures come together, and this is that sort of place. Nevada itself, Las Vegas, is a very freedom-oriented place. You can do anything you want. You can gamble all your money away. You can, in some parts of the state, you can go to prostitutes. You can, freedom is what Nevada is all about. Yet within Nevada, you have a place where there's no freedom, where the society is controlled by a totalitarian regime. That, to me, is a little bit like the old East Berlin.
Campbell told me that when you sign the oath of secrecy that lets you work in Area 51, you pretty much hand over your life to the government. I then met a woman whose husband had done just that.
It's a secret base. Nobody knows it's there, except the whole world. You go up to the little alien inn up in Rachel, right near the test site. Alien pictures everywhere. Everyone knows what Area 51 is. And everyone knows what Route 95 is. And that leads up to Mercury, which is the gateway to the base up there. And that's called the Widowmaker's Highway. And I didn't know for years what it meant. I thought it was because the buses drove so fast that they had a lot of accidents. I didn't realize that if you went to work there that you were going to die.
Helen's husband worked inside Area 51 for 5 years. Then he fell seriously ill. But because of his oath of secrecy, he couldn't tell his doctors much to help them.
My husband went to a doctor. He wasn't allowed to tell him anything about where he worked or what he did or what kind of materials he handled, how many people worked there. He couldn't tell him anything because it would put him in jeopardy of going to jail by violating his oath. So it was very difficult for the doctors to diagnose anything, and they just kept sending him from one doctor to another. And I remember one day in particular, we went to the doctor, and she took one look at him, and she said, "My God, you're losing your whole face," because it was peeling so badly. So then she sent him to a skin doctor, and he did every test he could think of, but he couldn't figure it out. Well, in the meantime, while this was going on, he would come home, you know, every so often and say, well, this guy got sick, or this guy died, or this guy's having an operation, and the guys are, you know, getting together and getting a collection up for these guys. And for a while there, it was like every week. And I said, well, what's going on up there? Why is everybody getting sick?
Helen's husband died, and he wasn't the only one. She and a group of former workers at Area 51 sued for compensation, and their case went to the Supreme Court.
So far, it's been very frustrating. The government won't even agree that Area 51 exists. And, of course, the guys are being threatened with jail if they speak up. So we're getting nothing but stonewalling. It's like the government doesn't care what happens to them.
America is full of contradictions when it comes to secrecy and openness. On the one hand, you've got, on the surface, a very open society. It prides itself on being extremely open. You know, this is a country with a Freedom of Information Act. You can get access to any information that you want, supposedly. But actually, that's not true. There is a whole section of the community, of government, of life, which is ring-fenced from that, and which you cannot get access to. And I think the intention is actually that you should never get access to it. And that's something that I've been acutely aware of as I've made the journey.
Makes me angry that we're not being told a great deal, because in certain times in the past when we were subject to the restrictions of the Cold War, it may have made sense to guard highly secret confidential technological information from a mortal enemy such as the Soviet Union. However, today, ostensibly, when the Cold War is over, this massive degree of classification still exists, and it extends into other areas besides UFOs, and yet we still have this mindset to cover up. We still have this mindset that treats the American people as if we're a bunch of sheep or a bunch of children who can't decide things for themselves, or would panic at the slightest disruption of our world beliefs or mindset.
Obviously, with the Cold War over, we have lost a focused threat. That doesn't mean that the world environment out there is any more benign. You know, as we sit here today, we've got airplanes deployed all around the world, exerting missions for our national security. To maintain that technological edge in the future requires the same sort of focus on modernization, on bringing these new technologies to the battlefield, so we don't find ourselves trapped into an attrition war situation. As a result of that, the technologies that are developed in the black world need to continue to be matured, and when the time is right, brought forward in the form of weapons systems.
Now, during the Cold War, it made sense to have those black programs. Now that the Soviet Union is no longer our adversary, it's still a dangerous world, but it's not like it was back in those days. And if we have a functioning technology in a black program, we should not be spending billions of dollars in a program that's visible to the public, trying to duplicate those technologies we already have. We can't afford that kind of waste. During the Cold War we could, because that was part of our defense expenditure of keeping those things secret. Well, we don't need to waste that money now.
My husband did do his duty for his country. He took the oath. He was helping building their defense system. And when he had a problem, there was no one there for him. And there's no one there for the other guys. They took the oath and they're sitting home suffering. And they have nowhere to go. I mean, it's even worse than being in a military, because at least they had the VA. They have nobody to go to. They have absolutely nothing.
Helen's case against Area 51 forced the government to improve environmental protection for its workers. But her request to find out what materials they were using was turned down by the Supreme Court on the grounds of national security. So what do I actually know at the end of this journey? I know that the Pentagon is involved in some amazing science, and that beneath this science, only the pinnacles of which we can see, lies some truly extraordinary and even stranger defense work, which may or may not explain the existence of UFOs. Do I think UFOs exist? Well, I saw enough in southern Colorado to know that there is something extremely strange going on there. But to say, you know, that there is any one explanation for what is happening there, I think is wholly simplistic. I think that the flip side of the truly inspirational work that a lot of these engineers are doing out in the desert is that, you know, there are people at the end of this story. There are people in Colorado, there are people in Nevada who are getting hurt by all of this. And, you know, that's actually, I suppose, at the end of the journey, what I come back to. It's one of the few things, actually, that you can cling to as being real. And, you know, I wonder sometimes whether the people who are doing these extraordinary things out in the desert fiddling around with strange science, you know, are bearing that in mind, whether they actually know what they're doing to the little guy. And I think now it's just worth remembering that when I look back on a month of the most extraordinary, really was the most extraordinary month, I think, of my professional life. And I can't pretend that I didn't enjoy it, because I did. But it was a bit scary at times too.